It has been said that if there ever were a truly universal language, it would most likely be expressed in the form of mathematics, geometry, frequency, and vibration. The information I'm going to present here has far-reaching implications that I'm not sure anyone has been fully able to grasp, from the very origin of civilization to how we perceive reality and structure our lives in the present day to the fundamental nature of reality itself. Once you begin looking into these ancient sites we find all over the world, and the mythological stories and symbolism that accompanies them, some truly baffling coincidences and synchronicities become apparent. Indeed, there are certain numbers that we find reappearing in the architecture, myths, and practices of ancient cultures that upon closer inspection seem to be some of the most significant numbers in the universe. I'm talking about the numbers found in the Factor 9 grid, specifically the number 432 and its numerical companions. Numbers like 3, 6, and 9 in vortex mathematics, which Nikola Tesla famously said that you would have a key to the universe if only you were to understand them, along with the golden ratio, the golden angle, the fundamental shapes of geometry, the musical scale, and more, are all connected in ways that I can only describe as simply divine. To give some context, let's explore the origin of numbers. For this, we'll have to look at the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia in 4000 BC. It is here that the base 60 numerical system was conceived by tallying up the knuckles on one hand, resulting in 12 digits, and multiplying it by the number of fingers on the other hand, adding up to 60. The number 60 is highly divisible, known in mathematics as a superior highly composite number. It has 12 factors, 3 of which are prime numbers. 60 is the smallest number divisible by the numbers 1 to 6, capable of being put into segments of 30, 20, 15, 12, and so on, making it the perfect number for the amount of minutes to ascribe to an hour. Astonishingly, the base 60 numerical system that mysteriously arose nearly 6,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent was so perfect from the beginning that it is still used today for measuring time, angles, and geographic coordinates. It is where we find our 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 360 degrees in a circle. Likewise, all of geometry, whether 2 or 3-dimensional, is derived from base 60. We will learn that from this system, some incredibly strange coincidences appear. But how did the ancient Sumerians invent this system seemingly out of the blue that was perfect at the onset? According to some scholars, the origin of base 60 mathematics is not as clear as we might hope. However, if we refer to the Sumerians themselves, written on clay tablets, they tell us that they did not invent this system, but rather were gifted this knowledge. They tell us that it was a race of sky gods, known as the Anunnaki, that they were the ones that provided humanity with this perfectly harmonious system. The role the Anunnaki might have played in humanity's prehistory is a hotly debated subject that goes beyond the scope of this video. For now, let's take a look at some examples of how we've grouped things in accordance with this system, specifically the number 12. Right away, we see 12 eggs in a dozen, 12 months in a year, 12 inches in a foot, 12 houses of the zodiac, and 12 notes in the musical scale, with 12 major and minor keys. The number 12 also carries significant religious, mythological, and magical symbolism. In general, it usually represents perfection, entirety, and cosmic order. It is essentially found everywhere, and while my curiosity makes me want to list every single one, I'll just briefly note the major examples. In Christianity, we have the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. Ishmael, the first son of Abraham, had 12 sons, and Jacob also had 12 sons that became the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel. Also, remember the particularly magical time of the year for children, the 12 days of Christmas? Whether it's the 12 Olympians of the Pantheon in ancient Greece, the 12 labors of Heracles, the 12 lingas of Shiva in Hindu temples across India, the 12 petals of the heart chakra, or the 12 sons of Odin in Norse mythology, it's clear that the number 12 must have been of great symbolic importance. But why? In the search for answers, we need to return to Sumerian base 60 mathematics. I previously mentioned that miraculously all of basic geometry stems from this extremely ancient system. It turns out that when you play the sum angle totals of various basic geometric shapes as a frequency, different arrangements of a numerically perfect major chord are produced. Take the triangle for example. Add up its 3 angles of 60 degrees to get 180. Now play this value as a frequency, and we can hear what an equilateral triangle sounds like. Somewhat paradoxically, the circle and square will both have the same tone, as the sum angle totals for each are 360 degrees. This is a perfect octave up from the triangle. Here's what they sound like. Moving up another octave, the pentagon has 5 sides, with angles of 72 degrees each, totaling 540. Have a listen. As a quick note, the reason I said it is somewhat of a paradox that the circle and square possess the same tone is because in sacred geometry, the square is terrestrial and the circle is celestial. These are 2 opposite shapes. Squares are finite and measurable, meaning the relationship between the sides of a square and its area is a purely rational number. Conversely, circles are infinite and immeasurable, meaning the relationship between its diameter and circumference is an irrational number. And we know that an irrational number never repeats and never ends. So the factor 9 grid is built on the note A vibrating at 432 Hz. Notice how every frequency in this grid has a digital root of 9, meaning if you add up the digits of each number, you will always get the sacred number 9. Interestingly, it's only when A is tuned to 432 or multiples thereof that a hidden matrix of synchronicities is revealed. Let's take a look at some of the places these numbers have appeared throughout the world's religions and myths, and some of the cosmic measurements and ratios they connect to. In Eastern religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism, the mala bead necklace has 108 beads. Specifically in Hindu ceremonies, a list of 108 different mantras are recited. During these ceremonies, the names of the 108 followers of Krishna are often mentioned as well. Additionally, one of the primary deities of Hinduism, Vishnu, is often portrayed wielding a disc-like weapon with 108 serrated edges. And finally, the Sanskrit language, one of the original languages spoken in this area, has a total of 54 letters. Each letter has a masculine and feminine quality, so 54 times 2 makes 108. Alright, so what if we zoom out a bit? Does the number 108 have any correlation to things of a cosmic nature? It is important to note that some of these correlations are not 100% precise, but come within margins of error that are so small that a pattern does emerge. For example, if we take the diameter of the Sun, which is 864,000 miles, and multiply it by the mystical number 108, we get the distance from the Sun to the Earth, which is approximately 93 million miles. Pretty crazy, right? Taking it further, if we multiply the diameter of the Moon, 2,160 miles, by the same number of 108, astonishingly, we get the approximate distance from the Moon to the Earth. Remember that the exact distances of these planets slightly change throughout the year, and that the Moon is very slowly moving away from the Earth. But if that isn't enough, we also find that the diameter of the Sun is roughly 108 times the diameter of the Earth, with only an error of about 0.9%. Did you notice how both the diameters of the Sun and Moon are of numbers that appear on the factor 9 grid? This of course makes the radii of these planets into 432,000 miles for the Sun and 1,080 miles for the Moon. There's honestly so many directions and tangents we could take in this investigation, but we'll try to stay in something of a chronological order. Next up would be the number 144. The descriptions of the Holy City in the Book of Revelation appear to include some interesting numbers as well. Revelation 21 verse 16 states that the height, length, and width of the city are of equal dimensions, measuring 12,000 furlongs. The furlong is an archaic unit of measurement that today is mainly used in horse racing, with 1 furlong being equal to about 220 yards. I think it's worth mentioning that 1 furlong is exactly 7,920 inches, which is equal to the diameter of the Earth in miles. Speaking of the Holy City in the Bible, John writes that the city walls will be 144 cubits thick. Furthermore, we find that the number 144,000 appears several times in the Book of Revelation. In the end times, it mentions how there will be 144,000 chosen ones to be redeemed before the apocalypse, 12,000 people from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. This number also appears along with others in the Mayan calendar, where the length of 1 Baktun is equal to 144,000 days. Once again, in various ancient Hindu scripture, including the Vedic texts and more, multiples of essentially all the numbers found in the 432 grid are found in the cosmological timelines of the Yuga cycle. Lastly, the Great Pyramid of Giza was originally covered in casing stones, made of polished white limestone. It is said that this outer layer of reflective stone would have made the pyramid visible from space. Can you guess how many of these casing stones originally covered it? Yup, 144,000. Alright, let's take a closer look at my personal favorite, number 432. If you recall from earlier, this is the most important number in the factor 9 grid, as it is the number of cycles per second to which the note A is tuned. Commenting on the number 432, the American writer and mythologist Joseph Campbell famously states that it is, quote, the most important mythological number in history. We can find it hidden in Norse mythology, for instance. In the Poetic Edda, there is a passage describing the size of the army that would be deployed to fight Fenrir the Wolf. 540 doors multiplied by 800 fighters gives us 432,000. In the lost work of the Babylonian writer Berosus, and of which later writers catalogued and translated, Berosus lists 10 kings that reigned before the Great Flood, with the total years of their reign adding up to 432,000. An even older list, known as the Sumerian king list, shows 8 successive antediluvian rulers. Antediluvian simply means before the flood. I'm sure we can all immediately notice the peculiar choices of numbers ascribed to their years of reign, as they are similar to the king list from Berosus. 28,800 years, 36,000 years, 43,200 years. These are all significant numbers harmonious with the factor 9 grid. The total number of years for all the kings adds up to 241,200. Of course, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the digital root of this number is 9. I think that whether these kings actually ruled for these spans of time is true or not is besides the point, as the numbers chosen in both of these lists don't lie. All of them correspond to all the other numbers I've talked about so far. They all relate to the 5 Platonic solids of basic geometry, measurements of time and space, and the musical scale that is tuned to 432 Hz. Moving on, in the Rig Veda, the first of the 4 books of the Vedas in Hinduism, it is confirmed that there are 432,000 syllables and 10,800 stanzas, or verses, throughout the text. Likewise, in the cosmology of Hinduism, 4.32 billion years is the length of time given for the Kalpa, or Day of Brahma. 4.32 million years encompasses one Katar Yuga, and 432,000 years is the length of the Kali Yuga, which is the present age we are living in. Perhaps the fact that might be the cherry on top is that the Great Pyramid is a 1 to 43,200 scale model of the Earth, meaning that if you multiply the perimeter of its base by 43,200, you get roughly the circumference of the Earth, and if you multiply its height by the same number, you get roughly the Earth's polar radius. Okay, so what the hell does all this mean? Well, I'm afraid the more you look into this stuff, it truly just keeps getting stranger. And there's so many examples that I continually find while doing this research, some which require much longer explanations and honestly might just warrant future videos on this stuff. But before I wrap this up, we gotta talk about some of the absolutely mind-blowing coincidences that appear when you start playing around with the number 432. First of all, 432 squared equals 186,624. Does that number ring a bell? It's eerily close to the speed of light in miles per second. In fact, it's so close that it bears an error of only 0.178%. Also note that we're not using arbitrary units of measurement here. All of these numerical connections between geological and astronomical dimensions are found using units of time in base 60 math and imperial units, which includes units like the furlong found in the Bible. What's more is that if you take the golden angle, a prevalent angle found in nature which is 137.5 degrees, and multiply it by pi, the answer is 432. Next, if you divide 144,000 by 432, you get 333.333 with 3 repeating forever. And lastly, e over 2 pi equals 0.432. Many will be familiar with the golden ratio, which is 1.61. Did you know that 1.61 squared equals 2.592? The exact same digits for the number of time in the great year. The golden ratio is also found in the relationship between the mile and kilometer, among many other things. What is going on here? How can this not be significant when it reveals so many numerical coincidences? I think it's important to keep an open mind when exploring these enigmas that encompass the realms of ancient history, mathematics, geometry, astronomy, mythology, religion, and spirituality, and to not limit our gaze to the views and opinions of any one area of study. There are so many mysteries in this world left to be revealed, and the story of our past is by no means a closed case. I think if there were to be a tangible, real-world phenomena connecting all these numbers, it would be the precessional motion of the Earth. Known as the precession of the equinoxes, it is the wobble of the Earth's axis that takes 25,920 years to complete one rotation. This amount of time, along with the time that each of the 12 constellations spend passing through the sky, a total of 2,160 years each, all work in harmony with the 432 grid. If we examine this motion more closely, by dividing the number of great years by 360, we find that the time it takes the Earth to turn 1 degree on its axis is 72 years. Essentially, 1 day of the great year could be equated to one average human lifetime. 72 is of course found abundantly in myths and scripture as well. I hope all this information has helped to paint a picture of how truly connected everything is. Music, 2 and 3D space, time, the spiritual, and the material, all united by a matrix of sacred numbers cherished by humanity since time immemorial. As a final note, let's take the equation of F equals 1 over T. This equation, which the aircraft technician George Van Tassel allegedly received after encountering a UFO, basically means frequency equals 1 something divided by time. For one, let's use the 1 great year, the 25,920 year cycle, and divide it by the most logical number associated with time, that being 60. What's the answer? 432.